Good morning. Welcome to another session on environmental impact assessment.
So we shall continue with Unit 3, Air Quality, Noise, Energy, Water Quality, Vegetation and Wildlife Impact. Course outcome: apply the knowledge of the impact of infrastructure projects on air quality, water quality, vegetation and wildlife. Learning outcome: impact of energy sources. Specific outcomes: various types of renewable energy, impact of energy sources on the environment. So in this session we will be looking mainly at various renewable energy sources and its impact on the environment. So some of the renewable energy sources that are being widely used today include wind energy, nuclear, hydroelectric, geothermal, solar, biofuels, biomass. So unsustainable firewood harvesting can lead to loss of biodiversity and erosion due to loss of forest cover. An example of this is a 40-year study done by the University of Leeds of African forests, which accounts for one-third of the world's uh, one-third of the world's total tropical forest, which demonstrate that Africa is a significant carbon sink. According to the UN, the African continent is losing forest twice as fast as the rest of the world. Once upon a time, Africa boasted 7 million square kilometers of forest, but a third of that has been lost, most of it to charcoal. So, coming to wind energy, right, and its impacts. So, mainly noise, right? So, like all mechanical system, wind turbines produce some noise when they operate. Most of the turbine noise is masked by the sound of the wind itself, and the turbines run only when the wind blows. In recent years, engineers have made design changes to reduce the noise from wind turbines. Early model turbines are generally noisier than most new and larger models. As wind turbines have become more efficient, more of the wind is converted into rotational torque and less into acoustic noise. Additionally, proper sighting and insulating materials can be used to minimize noise impacts. So, visual impacts. Because they must generally be sited in exposed areas, wind turbines are often highly visible. However, being visible is not necessarily the same as being intrusive. Aesthetic issues are, by their nature, highly subjective. Um, so, you know, you might have seen a lot of wind turbines um in many places, right? Yeah, so it's not just a single wind turbine, you have about maybe about 30, 50 wind turbines at a particular location. So what happens is that they are all tall structures, right? So this actually affects the aesthetic nature of the particular environment, right? So proper siting decisions can help to avoid any aesthetic impacts to the landscape. One strategy being used to partially offset visual impacts is to site fewer turbines in one location by using multiple locations and by using today's larger and more efficient models of wind turbines, right? So you don't dump all the turbines at a particular location. You can have a few turbines at one location, and in this way you can have multiple locations. uh, Avian or bat mortality. Birds and bat deaths are one of the most controversial biological issues related to wind turbines. The deaths of birds and bats at wind farm sites have raised concern by fish and wildlife agencies and conservation groups. On the other hand, several large wind facilities have operated for years with only minor impacts on these animals. To try to address this issue, the wind industry and government agencies have sponsored research into pollutions, relevant bird and bat behavior, mitigation measures, and appropriate study design protocols. In addition, project developers are required to collect data through monitoring efforts at existing and proposed wind energy sites. Careful site selection is needed to minimize fatalities, and in some cases, additional research may be needed to address bird and bat impact issues. So, the next one is nuclear power. A large nuclear power plant may reject waste heat to a natural body of water. This can result in undesirable increase in the water temperature with adverse effect on aquatic life. Emission of radioactivity from nuclear power plant is controlled by regulations. Abnormal operation may result in release of radioactive material on scales ranging from minor to severe. All of these scenarios are very rare. Mining of uranium ore can disrupt the environment around the mines. Disposal of spent fuel is controversial, with many proposed long-term storage schemes under intensive review and criticism. Diversion of fresh or spent fuels to weapons production presents a risk of nuclear proliferation. Finally, the structure of the reactor itself becomes reactive and will require decades of storage before it can be economically dismantled and in turn disposed of as waste. Next one is hydroelectric power plants. Dislocation of people living where the reservoirs are planned, release of significant amounts of carbon dioxide at construction, flooding of the reservoirs, disruption in aquatic systems, bird life, adverse impacts on river environment, potential risk of sabotage and terrorism, and in rare cases, catastrophic failure of the dam walls. These are some of the environmental impacts due to hydroelectric power plant construction. Sometimes only generate power and serve no other purpose, but in some places, large reservoirs are needed for flood control and or irrigation. Adding a hydroelectric portion is a common way to pay for a new reservoir. Flood control protects life or property, and irrigation supports increased agriculture. Right, so it may be a single purpose reservoir or it may be a multi-purpose reservoir. So there are two types, right? Some reservoirs support only drinking water supply. Some other reservoirs which are multi-purpose reservoirs, they are engaged for drinking water supply, power production, navigation, aquatic cultures, and so on. Small hydro and run of the river are two low impact alternatives to hydroelectric reservoirs. They may produce intermittent power due to lack of stored water. Tidal turbines. The main environmental concern with tidal energy is associated with the blade strike and entanglement of marine organisms, as high speed water increases the risk of organisms being pushed near or through these devices. As with all offshore renewable energies, there is also a concern about how the creation of EMF and acoustic outputs may affect marine organisms. Because these devices are in water, the acoustic output can be greater than those created with offshore wind energy. Depending on the frequency and amplitude of sound generated by the tidal energy devices, this acoustic output can have varying effects on marine animals, particularly those who echolocate to communicate and navigate in the marine environment, such as dolphins and whales. Tidal energy removal can also cause environmental concerns such as degradation of far-field water quality and disruption of sediment processes. Depending on the size of the project, these effects can range from small traces of sediment built up near the tidal device to severely affecting nearshore ecosystems and processes. Biomass. Electrical power can be generated by burning anything which will combust. Some electrical power is generated by burning crops which are grown specifically for this purpose. Usually this is done by fermenting plant matter to produce ethanol, which is then burnt. This may also be done by allowing organic matter to decay, producing biogas, which is then burnt. Also, when burnt, wood is a form of biomass fuel. Burning biomass produces many of the same emissions as burning fossil fuels. However, growing biomass captures carbon dioxide out of the air, so that the net contribution to global atmospheric carbon dioxide levels is small. Biofuels. Biofuels is defined as solid, liquid, or gaseous fuel obtained from relatively recently lifeless or living biological material and is different from fossil fuels, which are derived from long dead biological material. Various plants and plant derived materials are used for biofuel manufacturing. The process of growing biomass is subject to the same environmental concerns as any kind of agriculture. It uses a large amount of land, fertilizers, pesticides uh, that may be necessary for cost effective growth. Biomass produced as a byproduct of agriculture shows some promise, but most such biomass is currently being used for plowing back into the soil as fertilizer, if nothing else. Geothermal. While a geothermal power plant does not burn any fuel, it will still have emissions due to substances other than steam which may come from the geothermal wells, and these may include hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide. Some geothermal steam sources contain non-soluble minerals that must be removed from the steam before it is used for generation, and this material must be properly disposed. Any closed cycle steam power plants requires cooling water for condensers, diversion of cooling water from natural sources, and its increased temperature when returned to streams and lakes, and this may have a significant impact on the local ecosystems. Removal of groundwater and accelerated coolings of rock formations can cause earth tremors, enhance geothermal systems, fracture underground rock to produce more steam. Such projects also can cause earthquakes. Solar, the last one, right? So its negative impact on the environment lies in the creation of solar cells, which are made primarily from silica, and the extraction of silicon from silica may require the use of fossil fuels. Although newer manufacturing processes have eliminated CO2 production, solar power carries an upfront cost to the environment via production, but offers clean energy throughout the lifespan of the solar cell. Large-scale electricity generation using photovoltaic power requires a large amount of land due to the low power density of photovoltaic power. Land use can be reduced by installing on buildings and other built-up areas, though this reduces efficiency. Thank you.
Thus, we come to the end of this session. Thank you for your participation. Looking forward to meeting you in the next session.